discussion about a really important topic. I know many in the House are familiar with the Harris Center. If you're not, we're a nonprofit organization based in the Monadnock region of Southwest New Hampshire, and we help people fall in love with the natural world through land protection, conservation research, and education for people of all ages. We help protect more than 25,000 acres of land development, which is open for hiking, birding, and other recreation. It's just a number that astounds me. We help coordinate conservation research on those protected lands and throughout the region. And I'm really happy to be a part of that as part of my work as an ecologist at the Harris Center. And really at the heart of everything we do is education, from young kids to grown-ups and everybody in between. And I think we're all going to learn a lot tonight. We have many programs throughout the year, hundreds of programs, in fact. So tonight, we're really delighted to welcome Doug Sutherland for a program entitled Opening the Door Wide on Outdoor Experiences. And Doug's going to share some insights from his work as a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging consultant, a workshop facilitator with more than 20 years in the summer camp field, where I think Doug has done it all, from a counselor all the way to executive director. So thanks so much to Doug for being here tonight and for all of you and leading the discussion on this important topic.
Hello, everyone. Welcome tonight. As Karen said, my name is Doug Sutherland. I am a Hancock resident for, let's say 6 years. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of years in there. I'm not sure. I'll be honest. The year of COVID just threw me completely off as far as timing. Like, I see kids now that, like, Phil's daughter, like, wait, what? She's in what grade? Not just time just passed by really weird. So so let's say about 6 years or so in the Hancock area. But I've been in the Monadnock region for quite a while. And basically tonight, when I typically do these talks and I tell a bit of my story, I feel like the very beginning of it is somewhat like if you can imagine type thing. It's like, so I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri. If you've never been to St. Louis, it's hard to imagine, especially if you're only live, like, say, in this area, or I'm sure, because it's not Boston. St. Louis is not Boston. It's not New York either. And St. Louis is its own thing. Like, it has a very large downtown area, and then it starts to drop off, right? So then you get into, like, houses. However, St. Louis City goes into St. Louis County, and it's just, but it's all St. Louis, although they're basically a whole bunch of large towns, but they don't call themselves towns. Right around the city area, which goes out pretty far. So, and I'm originally from one of those towns called University City. And if you've heard of Washington University, that's the University City is where that town is. And University City is one of those towns I keep calling, well, see, I've been here long enough now. I use towns. But anyway, it's one of those places where, it's when people talk about the other side of the track type thing, right? So for me, and depends on who you talk to, what the track is, that was Olive Boulevard. It may have been like Del Mar, but it all depends on who you talk to. But for me, it was pretty much Olive Boulevard. For when you cross Olive, you were on that side of University City. And I didn't really realize this growing up, but on the other side of University City, you actually have street names named after universities. But as soon as you cross over, they stop that. I don't know why, but I didn't really realize that growing up. And as I thought about it as I got older, I'm like, I didn't know that. But it was a very, because the university was there was it's not even downtown. I mean, it's more like right next to the university, there was this, the Delmar Loop area. Again, most of the streets named after universities over there, but that was kind of the happening place. Very funky, very there was a record store. Remember those, the record stores that everyone went to. There was we had a walk of fame over there from St. Louis natives that made it big. That's where the library was, all these shops and everything else. I mean, it was, so you would go there if you're looking for something. It's like if you had, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you can imagine Gaia's Blessing and Joseph Coat in Peterborough, um, just funky stuff. You won't find a Gap there, or at least when I was there, may be one now, but you won't find a Gap there. You won't find any of those, you know, big box stores. It's all small stores. If you're looking for that one special item that probably only a few people have, or at least it'll seem that way, you go to the Delmar Loop area. But I lived probably another, let's say about 10, 15 minutes from there, north. Um, and you cross over Olive, and I was one street over. I grew up on Elmore. That's where my grandparents lived. And I didn't necessarily grow up with my grandparents, but I spent a lot of time there, a lot of time there. And at one point, we moved to Atlanta, then we moved back to St. Louis, then we moved to North Carolina, and then we moved back to St. Louis. And it was always going back to my grandmother's house, my grandparents' house. So over on Elmore, 8369 Elmore, you know, that's where I grew up. That's where my friends stayed pretty consistent. I moved around from school to school to school to school to school to school to school, all the way up into high school. I'm really glad right now my daughter has been in the same district with the same kids, you know, since she was in kindergarten. I just think that's amazing because I did not have that. Um, but and the friends on my street, we grew up together. You know, when I've gone back since then, um, some of those people are still there, and their lives are obviously, I guess you say, obviously they didn't move to New Hampshire, so obviously their lives are different than mine. And when my grandparents were alive, they were one of those, you just it, you just didn't mess with my grandparents, right? Like if nothing bad ever happened outside my grandparents' house, because my grandparents would sit on the porch and they would see you and they would call you out. They don't care who you are. They will call you out. And you just stop doing what you're doing, or just make sure you don't get seen doing it. Right. So and so that's what it was like growing up at my on this particular street. It was very safe. It was very you know, you had people that were um let's just say a little bit more rowdy than others. But again, not around my grandparents' house. You just didn't do that. Um, but as I got older and went off to college and came back to visit, the street started to change a little bit. Grandparents still stayed there as I moved away. Grandparents still there. Street changed a little bit more, but it was still always calm and quiet around my grandparents' house. And you know, it was a regular sized street, but you know, as soon as we had our Thanksgiving, we took up most of the street, you know, just my family. So it was just pretty crazy. But anyway, so what I wanted to do, giving you that little bit of background, is kind of bring it into the outdoors and the environment a little bit. Because in telling you where I grew up and what my family was like, that little bit, you have no idea necessarily how I know how I got into this. Got into one, the outdoors, two, how did I get to New Hampshire? And I'm going to go over that. And how I got so, for me, passionate about the environment. And it has waned and it has gained over the years, as far as that, but it's always been something that I started out with in St. Louis. So what I want to do, and what I did was put together a few slides, not a lot of slides, but want to give you an idea of where that came from. And as I was thinking about this presentation, I realized, like, well, you know, thinking about how I got here and what can we do to encourage this in others. The question that came to me was, well, did I did I change somehow in this, or did I adapt to it? Like, where did that come from? Did I adapt or did I change? Like, well, I made a decision, but I also had to do things over time in order to get used to being in the position I'm in now. So I couldn't decide. So my presentation, I'm going to share my screen with you. But so I thought about, adapt versus change. Did I adapt to where I am now, or did I change? And I feel like for me, the idea of how we can do different work is to figure out which one this is, right? So are we going to help people adapt to being comfortable in the outdoors? Are we going to help people adapt to being and understanding that the environment is something that we need to work to save and to appreciate? Or do we just have to go out there and, change hearts and minds to get them there? And for me, it felt like it was the changing things felt harder, the whole changing hearts and minds. So then I decided to look up what does adapt and change. What's the definition from Google? Make something suitable. I'm sorry, I'm blocking it. Make sure I say it right. Make something suitable for a new use, purpose, modify. Change, make something different, alter or modify. I'm like, okay, well, that was helpful. Like, well, okay. Again, I still felt like there was something different going on for me anyway. So I decided to think about going way back, way back. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was in this program called EcoAct at the Missouri Botanical Garden. This is their current logo. The Sci Foundation was not a part of it when I was was in the program. The EcoAct program was funded by the Desegregation Program of St. Louis. So basically, this program would bring together city kids, and that's kids from St. Louis City, and county kids from University City, where I was from. Now, University City is right on the border of St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And the further you went out, the students changed, right? So the city schools had a lot of issues. They were predominantly, not all, but predominantly Black. The county schools, again, not all, but predominantly white. The county schools seemed to have all the money, whereas the city schools were always struggling. And we were right on the line. So we didn't have a lot of money, but we weren't necessarily struggling at my high school. But anyway, so I had a friend when I was a freshman who was in this program, and they encouraged me to do it. And in high school, I was very much like, sure, I'll do it. Sure, I'll do it. So I did a lot of extracurriculars because people were asking me, and I'm like, sure. And I didn't want to stay home, but I didn't know what else to do. So I joined the student government. I was working with our ceramics teacher to make clay. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, whatever, I'll just do it. But I decided to join this program. And this program took high school students and trained them to teach environmental science and ecology to 4th and 5th graders. I kind of thought I wanted to be a teacher, but I also just kind of wanted to do something different, right? And I wasn't necessarily thinking about, I wanted to go work with kids. Now, as I wasn't in my head, I just wanted to do something different. And this program started during the summer. So during the summer, and it's changed a little bit now, but during the summer, there were, we would sign up for 3 weeks of summer programming for the high school students. And it was broken up into, let's say 2 groups. The first week would be at the garden, where we would start learning about environmental science and ecology. And we went there every day. And one of the days was a overnight at the garden. So this picture on the right here, that's, at least I believe, again, COVID messed up my memory, but I think I remember that is looking out onto the Japanese garden, right? And if you've ever been to the Missouri Botanical Garden, it's amazing. If you've never been, you need to go. Like, just go. People that visit St. Louis love it. A lot of people that live there want to get out, but people that visit love it. And if one of the spots you go to is the Missouri Botanical Garden, I highly recommend. It's amazing. But this was actually my first time camping out. So I don't know if it was the first night or what night it was, but we would sleep out in the Japanese garden. Like we would have sleeping bags and sleeping pads. We had tents if people wanted. No one else, no other program did this. And that evening, we would take a walk, a solo walk around the Japanese garden, right? And it was just, and no one else did this, and it was just something that this program did, and it was. I still remember it to this day. And we would sleep out there, and I was freaked out. Like I'm sleeping outside in this beautiful place, yeah, but I'm outside. But this place is beautiful, but I'm outside. Like this is weird. This is weird. This people don't do this. But I enjoyed it. I got through. I survived. You know, nothing attacked me at the garden. Now, when you picturing St. Louis, and so this is the garden. Surrounding the garden. Oh, now this is the shot from the Japanese garden that we slept on, looking out onto the it was, what was that bridge called? The idea of that bridge was is a horrible picture, but when you look at the reflection in the water from the bridge, it looks like a drum type thing. So that was, and we would cross that bridge, go over to their something tea island, where they would only go out there during a Japanese festival, have tea ceremonies on that island. It's the only time anyone was allowed out there. So it was a very special time for us to go out there. So just to give you an idea, as you see on this map, I just took a screenshot of a Google map. That's, yeah, as you can see, is the the Missouri Botanical Garden. Right below it was Tower Grove Park. Now, all around it were houses. Give you a better, more of a clearer idea. Tower Grove Park, Missouri Botanical Garden, homes, businesses, all surrounded. So we were sleeping at the bottom part of the Missouri Botanical Garden. There's a little white building right there. And all those trails around in that area, that's where the Japanese garden is. So here I am, freaked out, sleeping out overnight in the middle of this beautiful place. And yeah, you can hear cars and stuff, but you didn't see them while you were sleeping there, right? But you're surrounded by these houses. And this is my first outdoor experience. Luckily, this program didn't just keep us in the city. And I guess it's kind of city. But then the second week, we went on a 4-day, 3-night canoe trip. Now, the thing that you should realize when I talk about a canoe trip, when you go on a canoe trip with your family, maybe it's like you got 2 canoes. Maybe if you go with a group, maybe you have like 5, maybe. Well, we went on these canoe trips with about 40 people. And when I say 40, I mean 40. I mean, so that's a lot of food, a lot of gear, a lot of people, a lot of canoes. And this is not something, I am not a canoeer. Like I did not grow up in a canoe. I didn't grow up around the water. Doing anything in a boat was not something that I did. I wasn't a swimmer. I would go to the local pool where you can see the bottom, but the idea of going canoeing, yeah, this is not something I did, but I did do it. And we canoed on rivers, which was what I liked river canoeing, because if you didn't want to paddle, you didn't have to paddle until you had to paddle, which was annoying, but you had to do it eventually. Now, the thing with going on this trip, I should say, I so wish I had pictures of this, but if you can imagine, this was prior to 1999. People didn't have cell phones. Yeah, there were plenty of pictures taken, but those pictures are gone as far as I know. There's one picture that I still remember to this day. It was a very foggy morning, somewhat chilly. Someone took a picture of me coming out of my tent, had on a yellow or goldish hoodie sweatshirt, and just stretching and breathing in the day. And I still remember that picture to this day. It was, for me, I'm going to say it was an amazing picture. I wish I would have kept it. But the thing with it, that I wish I could share those pictures with you, because there's so many things I'm sure some things I don't want you to see, but some other things I think would be amazing. That on this canoe trip, we also camped out, I don't know about around here, because I haven't necessarily done any river canoeing around here, but in St. Louis, where we canoed on the Merrimack River. on the way out of St. Louis, but it and we slept on gravel bars. And prior to that, I'm thinking sleeping on sand, right? No, no, no. When I say gravel bars, you're sleeping on gravel. You're sleeping on rocks, literally rocks. So luckily we had sleeping pads, but let's just be honest, a sleeping pad and when you're sleeping on rocks is kind of, thank you. Is it really that useful? Anyway, but I had some of the most amazing experiences out there. And probably when it's not, if you would like at some point for me to tell you about my first time going to the bathroom in the woods, I'll tell you all about it. Won't share this right now, but I will tell you it involved a deer, which was really freaky. And being so afraid to come out of my tent at one point. And also when we had a raccoon visit us, visit our campsite and decide to stay the night with us. Very strange. I mean, it was like a kid that got a hook stuck in their foot, and someone that's dislocated their shoulder. I had my jumping far ahead, I started working for this program as I was going through college during the summer as an intern. And my boss at the time was pregnant, right? And so and we had a big storm come through, and rivers flood and they bust through land masses, and the river went up and busted through this landmass, and my boss, who was pregnant, decided she was going to go out there in the middle of the raging river to push canoes away from this big tree that fell in there. I'm like, why are you doing that? Oh, because I'm not going to do that. That's why you're doing that. That makes sense now. Okay. But things like that, that this is my introduction to being in the outdoors. Lots of amazing experiences that I will never forget. But that all comes from areas like this. I'm coming from area like this, surrounded by homes and everything. The river is not where I grew up in. Go to the next slide. Yeah. So when I started after college, I started working for the program. So as you can probably tell, I really got into this program. So I did this program sophomore year, junior year, and I've kind of worked my way into its senior year, but it wasn't necessarily official. I'm talking about being outdoors, but one of the things I really enjoyed was working with the kids. And we would go to these elementary schools once a week and teach ecology and environmental science. It was, I felt like I had my calling. So after college, and in college, I did not study environmental science. I studied everything else. But the problem was I spent so much time studying everything else. By my senior year, I didn't have enough credits for anything. Like I was curious, like, ooh, what's this? Ooh, what's this? What's this? For 3 years. And then my senior year was like, am I going to graduate? I just didn't have enough credits for anything. So I did my whole senior year as English lit. Do not do that. Don't do that ever. Don't do that in a year. It's a lot of reading just don't do it. Tell your kids, don't do that. So after I graduated, I became a hall director for a little bit, but then I wound up back at the garden working for the Missouri Botanical Garden. So as you can see in this photo, the bottom right is Missouri Botanical Garden entrance area. There was a little gate that went out. I had my first apartment right down the road, and I really wanted that apartment because further down was the best donuts on the planet. I'm not even saying in St. Louis, on the planet. I don't care what you make. I don't care if you have friends that make donuts, that's the place to go. And they had been there for years, and they're still there. I went back. I took my daughter there I believe when she was 7, and the people that ran it were still there. They were, and this, as far as I know, is still going. But if you ever go to St. Louis, go to the garden, then go get a donut. If you go in there and there's like a line, well, they're going to be sold out. But try to get there when they're available. Anyway, so I just want to put a plug in there for World's Fair Donuts. I spent a lot of money there, and it was back when donuts were not like $5 for a fancy donut. It was like 50 cents, and it was the best. They make them right there in front of you. Oh, okay. I'll stop talking about donuts. Okay. So from there, from the going back now to when I was in high school, I was a part of the Metropolitan Student Leadership Program. That, again, I don't have any pictures with this because didn't have cell phones back then. But Missouri Metropolitan Student Leadership Program took high school kids out into the woods. And this is where I started to do backpacking, rock climbing, rappelling, did some more canoeing. And I started to learn about being outdoors, not necessarily about teaching kids, but start to learn about, how to make your own harness with a piece of webbing. Nowadays, yeah, you do that if there's an emergency. You don't necessarily do that for fun. But here we are. Our leaders were teaching high school students how to make their own harness. And it's still somewhere in my head that if I had to, I might be able to figure out, but I hope I never have to figure that out. But this program was also the first time I saw a Black person as an instructor in an outdoor program. His name was Victor. We called him Vic. Really tall guy, really thick glasses. His hair was very thick. And he was the type of guy that, if you had a question, he'd be like, so what do you think you should do here? And it came across as very, not like condescending and not like, well, why don't you figure it out? It's more like, well, what are some options? Like, let's figure it out. Now, he may have had an idea, but he wanted you to figure it out. So that's what I remember from Victor. And I didn't really appreciate Victor until much later in life, which I feel horrible about in lots of ways. Like, I wish I would have got to know him more. And I also did High Adventure Explorers. High Adventure Explorers was part of was a subsection, I guess, of the Boy Scouts, but it was co-ed, and it took place at we met, I don't know, every week or so at the Monsanto building nearby my house. So and I was the only Black person in that. But we would basically, it was a whole bunch of high school kids hanging out first off, but we would take some trips. And one of the trips we took was out to Colorado. We got hopped into a big Suburban, and back in the day, we didn't necessarily have to have on seatbelts. And drove out there, did some cross country skiing, and we hiked Pat's Peak, which almost killed me. It didn't, but it almost did. Not really, but it felt like I was. And we were just, I remember seeing the peak. We were just down the road from it, and most of the group was like, we're done. And we turned around. We were just exhausted. Like, this isn't fun anymore. And as we turned around, we started to get our wind back. It was like, whoa, this is fun. And it's like, and I still, till this day, I'm upset that we didn't make it to the top. But also with this program, we would do, one of the trips was cave rappelling. Cave rappelling is exactly what it is. You go into a cave and you rappel off different ledges there. And we were going to go, and in Missouri, they're known for having quite a few caves. So we go to this one cave, and as we're driving in, it's on this farmer's property. We're driving in, and I see this dog. Like right now, I don't know how big my head is on your screen, but I mean, it was the biggest dog I've ever seen in my life. I mean, and it was attached to a chain that no dog should ever have that size of chain around its neck. And it was barking like, this chain will not hold me. And I did not want to get out of the van. And our leader went over and talked to the farmer, let him know we were there. We were getting out of the van, getting our stuff. And the leader came back over and said, well, we may not be able to do this. And I was like, and for me, I'll be quite honest, okay. Still looking at the dog. I'm like, I don't need to go any further. But he went over to talk to the farmer again. He let us go in. Now, because of this delay, we were only able to do one rappel. And once we got everyone in, then we had to climb back out. So we weren't there that long. And as we're packing up to leave, the leader pulls me aside and he tells me that, well, the farmer didn't want us to go into his cave because you were here. And I'm like, oh. And I'll be honest and tell you that I didn't care, because that was a big dog. Didn't care about the farmer being racist. Didn't care. That was a big dog. But thinking back on him, like, whoa, that was interesting. Like, almost the whole group couldn't do what we had permission to do because I was there. Going forward, a little bit more, Camp Minnewanka. It's part of the American Youth Foundation. They have a camp here in New Hampshire, also called Camp Mara Vista. But this one, Minnewanka, is in Michigan. And I was a part of a leadership conference. I want to say it was at the end of a summer. I was in high school. And it was at this camp, and it was a lot of high school students. We would sleep out and it was right on Lake Michigan. We'd sleep out on the beach, do all this camp stuff, blah, 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 blah. Then my most frightening experience in an outdoor setting. Now, this isn't really technically an outdoor setting because we were in cabins, but it had canvas tarp flaps for windows, right? So one night I'm sleeping and I feel this weight on my legs. And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm thinking, but I don't move for the next, I don't know how many hours. And eventually I fall asleep, but there was something on my legs that just sat there. It wasn't it was like in between my legs. So it wasn't a person or anything. Until this day, I don't know what it was. It probably was like a raccoon or something, I'm guessing. But I did not move. I just laid there in my sleeping bag over my head and breathing, and probably made myself pass out. I was so frightened of what this could be. To this day, I don't know what it was. And I think about it from time to time, like, I wonder what that was, right? So these experiences, having the first Black person in an outdoor setting, my first time experiencing racism in an outdoor setting, and having some frightening experiences in an outdoor setting. Now, should I have been that scared? No, but maybe in my head, it could have been a bear. It wasn't a bear. I'm sure it wasn't a bear, but it could have been anything that was going to attack me, and I just didn't move, and I got through it. So all these things have basically led me to here. So in 1999, I moved out to New Hampshire. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to get out of St. Louis. I wanted to work with kids outside. I wanted to teach environmental science. I learned so much. I remember the first time I really saw the stars, right? I remember learning about especially, working for the Missouri Botanical Garden, you learn a lot about plants and trees and environments and stuff like that. I learned so much, and it was like, whoa, this is just amazing. Like, I'm seeing the insect, a walking stick. Like, how can this be an insect? So much of it just blew my mind, and I wanted to share my excitement for with others. So I moved out here in 1999. I started working at the Boston University Sergeant Camp, soon to become Sergeant Center, soon to become Nature's Classroom at Sergeant Center. So I was there for about 11 to 12 years. And I moved out here with the plan to not necessarily stay out here for the rest of my life, right? My plan was to stay out here for a year and then go out west. Yeah, well, there we go. Plans, yeah. I don't know. Well, I'm sure there's some saying around plans, but yeah, that's not what happened. But for me, being out here, and I should say that it says here why I wanted to come here. What really got me when I got here was I had no idea what New Hampshire was all about. The only thing I knew about New Hampshire was that it was on the East Coast, and it probably wasn't going to be very humid because of being on the coast. St. Louis was very humid, very humid. It's on the coast. It's fine. Get away from the humidity. Oh yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah, no, that wasn't what happened. My first summer, I was very shocked. I wound up staying at Sergeant Center, and my first winter reminded me of a St. Louis winter. So I'm like, oh, I could do this. This is fine. My second winter just destroyed that for me completely. When we had it was a nor'easter and it snowed for 3 days. And like, I don't understand how it can snow for 3 days. Like, how until I found out what a nor'easter was. I'm like, okay, now I get it. But it was so much snow, we were shoveling off roofs and then jumping off the roof into the snow. Like, who does that? Like, this is complete madness. But then during the next few years, working for the summer camp, but also for their school program and working with kids outside and learning about things that I didn't know and using the things I did know. And all this is when I'm around 25, 26 years old. And there were a lot of people I was working with that were 18, 19 years old. Um, but they grew up in areas like this. They were very comfortable in areas like this. And here I am taking kids for a night hike. That Why are we out at night? Like, where are the lights? Like, oh, it's a flashlight. I'm like, yeah, well, flashlight. And it took a lot for me to get used to it. And over time, what I would do is like, we'll go on a night hike and I'll, have the kids walking in front of me and I'll cut off into the woods and meet them at the trailhead type thing. And they're like, how did you get here so fast? I'm like, oh. And so I was a lot more comfortable as I started doing it more in the woods with those kids. Now, the other part of all this is like it says on here, I want to show a person of color working in the outdoors. There was part of me that thought there would be a lot more kids of color so then they can see a person of color in the outdoors. My experience is there wasn't that many kids of color. There weren't that many staff of color other than myself. So it just became, I wanted the kids that we had, to see a person of color in the outdoors. Had a great time with those kids and those staff members, lifelong friends. I mean, it was 10, 11 to 12 years with a lot of those same folks. It's my hope that, if I ever were to start at camp, those people that I worked with then who now have little kids will someday come to my camp, right? So I think that would be amazing. My campers whose kids now are old enough to come to camp will come to camp. I just think that's amazing. So anyway, let me go next slide. Oop, is that the last one? Yeah, I think that's the last slide. Yeah, so basically I wanted to give you a image of where I'm coming from. Now, here I am in New Hampshire, decided to stay, had opportunities to leave, but decided to stay. So when I think about the idea of, did I adapt to this wanting to be in the outdoors, and how did I adapt to this? Just because I learned about it and I became comfortable with it? Or did I decide to make the change and be here no matter what, if I adapted or not? And what I decided was it's really both. Like, both of those things happened at some point, right? I started to learn about it, started to be more comfortable with this area. But I also decided that I didn't want to live in a city. Definitely didn't want to go back to St. Louis. I got out, I was free. I don't want to go back. But it had to be both. Both of those things had to be true for me. And so when I think about young folks coming out, not young folks, but the DEI idea of people being in the outdoors and being comfortable with it, and what areas like this can do about it, and what areas that are not like this can do to bring people in, it becomes I decided, it's a good question. How do we do that? And for me, it really is providing that experience, not expecting the experience. So for me, it wasn't that someone said, oh, you'll love the outdoors. Like, no, I didn't love it at first. There were too many bugs. There were too many, there was fear. There was deep fear in being in the outdoors. And when you tell me that, oh, you're going to love this, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, and every part of my being is like, no. I mean, I hear you. I have to make the decision to make that change and go against everything my body's telling me in order for it to prove to me that I'm okay, right? And this is not for everyone. Some people will never come out into the woods. Why would they? They live in a city. They have everything they need there. And I think it's important that we realize that everyone doesn't have to come out into the city, out into the country. They don't have to. We would love for them to, but it has to be a decision that's made. They have to make that decision, and they have to make that decision to come out there. And all you can do, and all we can do, is present it to them. And if they find that one thing that gives them that spark in them, like, oh, I want to do this again, great. But I feel like our job is only to introduce it to them. That's it. That's it. If you want them to love it, you have to introduce it to them and then hope they do. To say something like, I love this, so you should love this. Like, yeah, no, I don't think it's gonna work that way. Because there's so many things going against us in this area. The main thing also in this area is that there are not a lot of people of color. There's not a lot of BIPOC folks in this area. And if they are, well, where are they? Well, they're probably, let's say, for example, Keene. They're in Keene. Well, why are they in Keene and not in Hancock? Well, there's something, it's a big town, I guess, right? So, and they can drive by it, but they go to a place where they don't have to worry about the, bears and, as many insects and all that. Yeah, I think that's true. And also, what's also true is that fear is the fear part, right? Be honest and tell you, I will never, walk up to anyone's house unless they're there because of fear. I won't go on a trail that's through someone's property unless someone else is with me, and preferably that person is white. Why? Because of fear. And it's a real thing that I think people just need to understand. You may be very comfortable, and I get that, and I'm so glad you are. But the idea that everyone should be and should automatically be there, we need to let that go. And if you need to walk with someone, I would recommend doing that, and giving them the option. If they get uncomfortable, instead of saying, "Oh, it's okay, you'll be okay," say, "Would you like to turn around?" And turn around and turn around. Yes, you'll miss out on the hike. So what? That person's comfort is really important, and maybe you can try it again someday. So what I wanted to do also was open this up for a little bit of discussion, or in question and answer, a little bit of discussion, if you like, around what we can do to make the outdoors more accessible to people that are different from the people that are typically in the outdoors. And I want to make sure to say that it's not true that there are only white people in the outdoors. It's not true. It is not true. And if you think that it is true, you're wrong. I'm going to tell you that. However, it may look like that from where you're sitting, right? But there are some real reasons. One, the reasons is that they're not around here. Two, there is that fear idea. Three, there's just discomfort. If I have to go to the bathroom, where am I going to go to the bathroom? Oh, just go by that tree there. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. It's real, but I was curious, like, what do you think? What are some ideas you have about getting more folks, BIPOC folks? I know that the Harris Center has the name escaped me, but a hike that they did before with maybe gay, lesbian, transgendered kids or folks. Yes, absolutely. Things like that. If anyone would like to unmute themselves, or care if you want to unmute them, ask a question or bring up something, that would be great.
Thanks so much, Doug. That was great information. I think the best way to do this is if you go under reactions, where your little smiley face is along the bottom, you can raise your hand that way if you want to speak, and then I can unmute you, and then which I have to do by making a co-host, I think, because of how our settings are set up. So don't let that scare you. And then if you'd rather have Phil or I or Lisa pitch the questions to Doug, you could put them in the chat, and then we could do it that way. So I saw that Josh, you have your hand raised. So let me make you a co-host here. And all right, you should be good to go now, Josh. You should be able to unmute yourself. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Karen, and Doug, for your presentation. And thank you for mentioning the LGBTQIA plus community, and that hike specifically. I'm thinking about the different considerations that have to be taken in place for planning a LGBTQ hike, and especially with like a community that is vulnerable to hate violence, and how to, like, what considerations were taken in place for planning that hike, the LGBTQ hike. Like, I know that safety is something very important, and not disclosing the location right away on promoting the event, it's something very important. And but when the location is something that is already known, because for example, for organizations that they are in a space, so how to plan something like that when not sharing the location is not an option because it's already known. Like what can be done in that instance?
So I don't know if someone from the Harris Center can answer that. Like, what has, what were your considerations for the hike, for that hike? I don't remember the name of that. I want to say Rainbow, but I don't think that's right.
I mean, I know what I can say about that, Josh, is that we recruited some members of our community that are part of the LGBTQ plus community to be trip leaders. And then also I don't believe, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong, I think they had to register in order to receive the location for that. So I think that was only disclosed to people who registered. And of course, there isn't, a lot of our trails at the Harris Center are open to the public, so there wouldn't be a way to, preclude others from using the trail at the same time. So there always could be the situation where there are other trail users at the same time the hike is occurring. But I do think that provision was in place to sort of, keep the outing sort of more reservation only, and not published on our webpage. And beyond that, I can't really say, but we'd be happy to connect you with some of those folks that led the hike, and they could tell you a little bit more. Phil or Lisa, do you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, like you said, Karen, and Josh, thank you for expressing that, because that's a consideration that hadn't occurred to me as somebody who helps plan some of the outings at the Harris Center and field trips. So yeah, we typically just keep those locations quieter so we can keep the group a little bit more manageable in size. So it's reservation only for a lot of these events, but yeah, that's another something that we should think about a little bit more. And that is part of a series that we're trying to maintain offerings on a seasonal basis. So really appreciate your participation in that. Yeah, Doug, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, and so I remember talking with the Harris Center back way back around, what can the Harris Center do? And I've talked with other organizations, like, what can we do? And I want to just express to everyone here, do something, right? It may not work. You may not get folks from a particular group there. I don't care, but you're not doing anything now. So you're definitely not getting them. Right. So if you want to have a LGBTQ hike, do some homework, figure it out and do it. And because someone may be looking for it. If you want to have a BIPOC hike, do it. If you want to have a hike for Black people specifically, do it. And just because right now, if you're not doing it, because no one's going to come. Well, no one's going to come anyway, because you're not doing it. So I'm a big fan of go out there and try it and see what happens, and show people that you are there. And if you have to do it more than once, do it more than once. Because right now it will never be accessible if people don't know it's happening. And what folks like, we use the Harris Center as an example, is the idea of getting if you want to do this work and get, if your goal is to get increased diversity in the outdoors, you have to do something in order to increase the diversity outdoors. You just can say, we want to do this, but we're going to do everything the way we always do. So the idea of adapt versus change, well, I think organizations need to adapt to what the world is like now, no matter what people out there say. If your organization sees that this is something that is happening in this community and we want to be a part of it, you need to find a way to adapt and make it happen. And you need to change, make the decision to change how you offer things. Just do it. Don't talk about doing it, just do it. And if it doesn't work, do it differently the next time. If that didn't work, do it differently again. Because once you stop, because right now, I would say a lot of people have stopped. They don't want to talk about DEI anymore. Like, oh, well, that's over and done with. And my hands just go up. It's like, but once you stop, it's a lot harder to get going. So we just need to change our mindset around all this. And it's something that especially if there's a program that I do that's about your mission, right? For your organization, right? And it's a random phone call. But I also do like have you think about your personal mission, right? But if your mission for your organization is to work with all folks in this particular field or whatever, it's all folks. It's not just the folks that it's not just white folks. It's all folks. So make sure you're doing everything for that. Now, your mission could be to only work with white folks. All right, well, you're very specific. Great. But if your mission is to help people become comfortable in the outdoors, nothing should be stopping you from doing DEI work. Nothing. And if you say, well, I don't know, like, well, you're not doing your job, right? You just got to do it. You got to do it, because it's your mission. Now, if your personal mission is to work, to be kind to everyone, for example, that means everyone, not only the only kind of people you like, because that's not that you may change your mission to match that. But my personal mission is to stand up, speak up, and do something. It's not stand up, speak up, and do something for Black folks. Stand up, speak up, and do something every single day. When I see something I need to stand up for, something I need to speak up for, and I need to do something. And it's that broad, yes, but I can do that. I make sure it happens with, so if that's for my daughter, if that's for the kids in my daughter's class, if that's for the kids in my daughter's school, if that's for the kids in this district, I'm going to do that. Not just for that kid, but for all the kids there and for that kid, because that's what it's all about. That's what DEI work is all about. You want the outdoors to be accessible. You gotta actually do it. You just can't put it in your mission that it's accessible and say you're done. There was a question from Susan, what age are kids interested in exploring the new experiences outdoors? I say as young as toddler, really getting them out there. But at the same time, I would say, personally, I would say if you get out there, get them when they're young, like especially if I think about schools around the area, if you want to get more, let's say, Black kids into the outdoors, you're not going to find those kids necessarily, a lot of those kids that are not already in the outdoors in the Monadnock region, right? There's definitely some. I have one, but they live in this, right? So you got to go further. Maybe it's to Nashville, maybe it's to Manchester. Yep. That's okay. If you want to do that, that's what you have to do, and you may not be able to afford it. Granted, got that. Well, what do you need to do next? So finding a way to make it happen, if that's what you want to have happen. I think that's the most important thing when it comes to this work is like, don't just stop because, well, we don't have people here. That's like saying there are no I don't know any gay, lesbian, or transgender people, so they're not in the area. Like, and then you just kind of like, really? Are you kidding me? Right? Because that's not true. Right? So if you want a program, do the program, see who comes. If you want people to be comfortable, you got to help them feel comfortable, or at least introduce it to them. And, it's not going to happen overnight, but we have to do something to make sure it happens. If that's what you want, right? If that's what we want to have happen. If you decide you don't care, well, that's what we've been doing for years anyway, I guess. But if half the people on this call cared about that, then that's half, those 5 people bringing someone out into the woods and helping them feel comfortable and appreciate it, that's 5 more people than there were before. Then you won. Are there any other questions or anyone want to chime in?
I have a question that I'm a little intimidated to ask, but I think that means it's a good question.
Okay.
The Harris Center, we don't have any people that identify as Black, to my awareness, that are employed there. So how would we want, I think, and I do think we care, a lot of us at the Harris Center, and as an organization, we care. But I think one of our, blind spots is that we when we do a lot of our trips, we don't have someone on staff that's a person of color that can like lead the trips. So my question is, how would Black folks feel about having a hike for Black people that's led by a white person? Or are we really screwing up by doing that?
I would say you're screwing up by not doing that.
Okay.
Okay, to be very straightforward and honest.
Yeah.
Because if that's what you have, that's what you have.
Yeah.
Right. Because being in the summer camp industry in New England, I work with a lot of folks, predominantly a lot of those folks are white. And it's the same thing. Like, well, why don't, we work with black folks, but they don't work for us type thing. They come to camp, but they don't, they decide not to come work for us. I'm like, okay. All right, so what are you doing? Like, well, we just hire staff. Like, well, all right, well, do you want more Black folks? You have to go out there and find them. If you don't have them, what are you going to do? Not have camp? You're not going to have the hike. They still have camp, and you should still have the hike. Still offer it, right? Because what's going to happen is at some point, this is not quick, or it could be quick, but I wouldn't count on it. Is that hiker loves that hike, wants to do another hike, and they want to be a part of what happens at the Harris Center. And a position opens up that they're like, oh, this will be great. It takes time, just to, there are folks out there there are Black folks, BIPOC folks that love the outdoors out there. And you can tell because they're working in the outdoors. They're not working in the outdoors here. And it's nothing against Hancock. It's nothing really somewhat against New Hampshire. But the idea behind it is that, and you can't do anything about it, unfortunately, Harris Center or any organization. One of the reasons why there are not a lot of Black folks here, I would assume, is that there's no services for them, right? They don't feel like they're accepted here. You have no control over that, right? It's like there are things that I need that are in Manchester, there are things I need that are in Boston, and there are a lot of white folks, right? There are a lot of white folks, right? So I'm just not comfortable here. And this is not your fault. You may want people here, that's fine, but it's not your fault that they're not here. But if you can have a program that invites those folks to come out here, even just for a day, and maybe it's going to be talking with like NAACP about offering a hike for their members and see who shows up. And they don't know that it's going to be led by a white person. Or maybe there's someone on their team that's like, well, I hike a lot, like, okay, let's do this together. So it's going to be thinking outside the box a little bit. It may not be on your staff, but it could be on the staff of a group you're trying to entice to come out. Right.
Right.
So it's just going to be looking at it differently. But the biggest mistake people make is to not do anything because, it won't work because of this. You have no idea. And you may come back and like, see, Doug, we tried it and it didn't work. I'm like, okay, so what are you gonna do next time? And what are you gonna do the time after that? Just if it's what you want, you got to go for it.
Yeah. That's really inspiring. I really, I love that. And
and if I could, Karen, and just say, you will mess up. And that's okay. I'd rather you mess up, do something and mess up that as opposed to not do anything, because then that's a big mess up. That's just, it won't probably work the first time. You'll have to figure out how to make it like any other program you've done, like, oh, this is a better way to do this. We should do this next time. You do that with every other program. It will happen with this one too.
Yeah. All right, that's great advice. I know a lot of us here will take that to heart and try to, really think about that seriously. Well, I think we could all talk about this for hours and hours and hours to come, and I hope we can continue the conversation with you further, Doug, since you're so local to us. So thanks again for everybody for being here, and I hope you enjoy the program, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. And thanks again for Doug for a wonderful sharing of information and insights and ideas. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, everyone. It's good seeing you, or most of you anyway. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.